Hey guys, this video is meant to help you understand Washington's farewell address. His farewell address is the address that he gives to the nation after his second term in office. And basically it's his advice for the country. And so it's really important document, being our first president, and what advice does he give for the country. So we're going to read through it, and I'm going to go over certain parts of it. Probably not every part of it that may be confusing. So if you don't understand a term or a sentence or a phrase, then you should look it up to help you understand that. So here we go. He says, in contemplating the causes which may disturb our union. Okay, so disturb our union basically means hurt our country, right? Union, that's his way of saying America. It occurs as a matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western. So parties here doesn't mean like a fun party. It means a group. He's saying that it is concerning that we have different groups based on where people live. Okay, the North, the South, the Atlantic, the Western. That's concerning that we are kind of getting into, it's almost like cliques. He's saying that is concerning. Whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. So scheming men, men with bad motives, might try to get people riled up to their local views and what they want. One of the expedients of party, a group, to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. Okay, so expedients means like means or ways. So one of the ways that parties acquire influence, they get power, is that they misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. So they misrepresent others. It's kind of like today with Republicans and Democrats. Like if President Trump says something about the Democrats, let's say Nancy Pelosi, okay, he misrepresents what the Democrats are saying usually. And same thing goes if Nancy Pelosi is talking about the Republicans, then she will often misrepresent what the Republicans are saying. And so we can see that Washington predicted that. Okay, you cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. Okay, so there he says, that last part, let's look at that last part of that sentence. They tend to render alien. So alien, another word for that would be like foreign. They tend to make foreign those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. Fraternal affection means like family. Okay, fraternal means family, like brothers. So parties, they tend to divide each other, right? Like we're a country, we ought to be united like a family, but parties tend to divide each other, divide the people, okay? And do you notice that today in politics? Do you think that parties divide people today? Was Washington right about that? Next paragraph. Let me now take a more comprehensive, a broader view, and warn you in the most solemn manner against the harmful effects of the spirit of party generally. The alternate domination of one faction over another. So, the domination of one faction. Now, faction here means, again, like a group. So, what he's referring to is the parties again, okay? So, the domination of one party over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension. So, revenge is just a natural part of having parties. That is itself frightful and will lead to rule by one person. So what Washington's saying is that parties and these factions that are against each other, that have this revenge, okay, that's just natural to having opposing parties, is going to lead to rule by one person. That's what it's going to lead to. And he tells us how that's going to happen in this next one. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. So these problems and misery that come about because of these parties are going to eventually cause people to seek security and repose. Repose means like a peace, okay? They're going to find peace in the absolute power of an individual. So one person ruling, someone that calms their fears, or they can find peace in that. That's what parties are going to lead to, according to Washington. Let's go on now to the second page and start at the top here. Promote then, as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. So that part right there, promote then, so encourage as something that's really important, institutions for the general diffusion. Diffusion means like the spread of knowledge. Okay, so what is he saying there? He's saying that learning knowledge, gaining knowledge, and the institutions that help us do that, that should be what we place importance on. That's what we should make our priority. So some examples of places where we gain knowledge, institutions. So we have schools, obviously, libraries, universities. We have the internet as a place to get knowledge. So we have many different places where we can get knowledge, and Washington's saying here that that's what we need to place importance on. That should be the importance, that people can gain knowledge. And then in the next part, he tells us why that is. He says, in proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion, so force means power, so when a government gives power to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened or educated. So he says, because the government gives power to the people, right? In a republic, the people are in charge. That principle we talked about, popular sovereignty, the people are in charge. In a republic, the people are in charge by voting for representatives who will represent them and make decisions. And so he's saying people need to be educated because they're in charge. And so it's vital that they are educated and know what's going on. Next, as a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. So public credit basically means the country's ability to borrow money. One method of preserving public credit, the ability to borrow money, is to use it as sparingly as possible. So, what is he saying there? Don't borrow money a lot. Okay? Avoid debt. Avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace. So let's try to be peaceful. War is very expensive, as we've seen. And so let's try to make sure that we have peace and don't go to war. Avoiding, likewise, the accumulation of debt. Don't acquire debt. Don't go into debt. Not only by shunning occasions of expense, so by not spending too much money, but by vigorous exertion, so effort, so vigorous exertion, trying really hard in time of peace to discharge the debts which unavoidable wars may have occasioned. So when we are in time of peace, then we need to try to pay off the debt that we have. Sometimes we're going to have wars. Some wars are unavoidable, and we're going to get some debt. But when we have peace, let's make sure that we pay off the debt. Not ungenerously throwing upon posterity, so our future generations, the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. So he's saying why we don't want to go into debt. We don't want to go into debt because we don't want our children and our children's children, we don't want them to have that burden of debt. Okay, last paragraph. Observe good faith and justice toward all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations. So with foreign countries, what we should do is we should do business with them. Okay, commercial means business. We do business with them, but to have with them as little political connection as possible. Okay, so we should be involved with foreign countries as far as doing business, but we should avoid political connection. What does that mean? Well, that means like having allies, right? So we should avoid that. Remember, Washington wanted to remain neutral. So far as we have already formed engagements, agreements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Okay, so summarizing that last paragraph, do business with other countries, but don't make allies. We should try and remain neutral. Okay, so let's summarize Washington's advice, some of his main advice from this farewell address. Okay, so now let's look at some of the advice, kind of summarize the advice that George Washington gave us. So first of all, early on in the letter he tells us that as a country, we should avoid political parties. Political parties are bad. They lead to division. They divide us. And ultimately, they can lead to rule by one person. Okay. Second, he tells us to promote education. Education, it is important that the citizens are educated because they're involved in the government. So people should be educated. Third, he tells us that we should avoid debt. Okay, as a country, debt is bad. We should avoid debt, and it's important when we do have wars and we do have some debt that we get out of debt when we're in peace. Okay, fourth, he tells us to do business with other countries. So be involved with them as far as business goes, but avoid allies. So political connection, as he says. So there's some of the advice that George Washington gives us in his farewell address. Now let's look at how we're doing with following his advice as a country, on a couple of these at least. So first of all, right here, this page shows the debt that we are in America. Okay, so if you look up here in the left-hand corner, 23 trillion, not million, not billion, but $23 trillion in debt and rising. This is a page from a website that shows like how fast it rises. So we're not doing very good at that as far as that goes. What about another other piece of advice he gives is to do business with other countries. How are we doing with that? Well, if we look over here, it shows on this little graphic, this is the red indicates the McDonald's that are around the world, okay, the red circles. And so this is just one example of one company, but we are, doing a pretty good job of interacting with foreign countries as far as business goes. There's another map I have that's not on here, but it shows also the military bases that are around the world, and we have bases in many different countries. We actually have allies. So as far as Washington's advice, if you remember, was that we shouldn't have political connections. We shouldn't have allies. But if you look at maps of where military bases are, we definitely have allies around the world. So also think about how are we doing with political parties. If you watch the news, read the news, you can definitely tell that political parties are causing contention, it's causing division, and I want you to notice if you watch the news or see clips of politicians, think about, are they misrepresenting the other side? And I think that you'll find that often they are. So I hope this helped you understand Washington's farewell address, and we'll talk to you guys later.